There are things in life that do not leave with noise. They do not leave with an announcement. They do not leave through some dramatic speech, some pointed social media post, some theatrical goodbye, some slammed door. There are things that only truly leave when they leave in silence. And maybe that is one of the deepest truths in Stoicism, even though most people do not notice it at first. Because the Stoic is not living to impress the world. He is living to govern himself. And the moment a person begins to govern himself, he starts to understand a truth that changes everything. Not everything that needs to be cut off needs to be explained. Not everything that needs to die inside you deserves a funeral. Some things, in fact, only begin to change when you stop turning them into a spectacle. It is strange, because a lot of people imagine that changing your life always has to be some major event. As if every transformation needs witnesses. As if every healing has to be announced. As if every stage of growth has to be approved by other people. But no. Most of the time, life changes in an invisible field. It changes when you decide not to answer. When you decide not to go back. When you decide not to argue. When you decide not to keep forcing something. And from the outside it looks like nothing happened. But on the inside, an entire empire has been rearranged. Marcus Aurelius, in the middle of power, in the middle of war, in the middle of all the noise of the world, wrote to himself like a man lighting a small lamp in a dark room. Not for an audience. Not for applause. Not to look wise. He wrote so he would not lose himself. Seneca spoke about the need to strip away excess, to notice how much of life is wasted on agitations that do not deserve our breath. And Epictetus, maybe even more directly, reminded us that freedom begins when you stop depending on what is not yours to control. That is the backbone of everything we are walking through here. Because there are things you need to remove from your life, and most of them do not need an announcement. They need courage. They need clarity. They need discipline. And above all, they need silence. The first thing you should remove from your life in silence is the need to explain yourself all the time. That almost automatic urge to justify who you are, what you want, what you chose, why you stayed, why you left, why you changed, why you think differently now. It is exhausting to live as if you are always standing in front of a courtroom. And the saddest part is realizing that, most of the time, that courtroom does not even really exist. It is in your head. You imagine questions before anyone asks them. You prepare defenses before anyone attacks you. You try to secure universal understanding for decisions that came out of the deepest part of your own life. But maturity is not being understood by everyone. Maturity is staying on the right path even when not everyone understands. The Stoic knows life is not a public debate. Not everything has to be turned into an argument. There are people who do not want to understand you. They just want to participate in your doubt. They want their hands on the wheel of your life. They want you to explain yourself so they can give an opinion, not so they can truly hold space for you. And when you see that clearly, a different kind of peace begins to grow. You stop wasting energy trying to translate your soul to people who do not know how to listen. You stop handing detailed explanations to those who already decided to interpret you in the most convenient way for them. And little by little, your silence stops looking like weakness. It becomes a boundary. How many right decisions got delayed because someone was waiting for approval? How many fresh starts never happened because a person felt like they had to convince the whole family first, the friends, the partner, the world? But some changes lose their power when they are discussed too much before they are lived. There are seeds that need soil, not an audience. You do not need to explain your discipline. You do not need to explain your distance. You do not need to explain why you protect your peace now. The people who are truly meant to stay close to you will notice through the effect of your change. And the people who only respect you when you justify yourself never really respected your essence. They only respected your willingness to bend. The second thing that needs to go is the hunger for approval. Maybe this is one of the most elegant and most dangerous chains there is. Because it does not show up looking like a prison. It shows up looking like connection, acceptance, belonging. You start out just wanting to be liked. Then you begin adjusting the tone of your voice. Then you edit your opinions. Then you hide parts of yourself so you do not upset anyone. And before you know it, you are living a negotiated life. A life built around the gaze of other people. And almost nothing wears a person down like that. Epictetus said that if you want to make progress, you have to be willing to look foolish in the eyes of some people. That line carries real force. Because growth often means disappointing the version of you that other people had gotten comfortable with. Maybe they liked you better when you said yes to everything. Maybe they preferred the version of you that was more insecure, more available, easier to control. Maybe your peace offends the people who fed off your chaos. So the central question becomes this: do you want to be approved, or do you want to be free? Most of the time, you do not get to keep both for very long. Removing the hunger for approval in silence means you stop announcing every new posture. It means you do not need to say, "Now I'm going to value myself," or "Now I'm going to put myself first," or "Now no one gets to walk over me." No, you just start moving differently. And then you do it again, and again, until your life starts speaking for you. The Stoic does not advertise his own strength. He practices it. He understands that the value of an upright life is not in the recognition it receives, but in the integrity with which it is lived. And there is an important detail here. Anyone who lives chasing approval never gets to rest. Because the audience changes. Taste changes. Expectations change. The applause you get today becomes the pressure you carry tomorrow. The same people who praise one version of you may reject the next one. So if your peace depends on that emotional marketplace, your peace is always at risk. Serenity begins when you trade the question, "Did they like me?" for the question, "Was I faithful to what is right?" That question is steadier, stronger, more stoic, because it puts the standard back in your conscience, not in the crowd. The third thing you should remove in silence is the habit of comparison. That quiet poison that ruins the present without making a sound. Comparison steals the joy of what is growing inside you, because it keeps pointing to what has already grown in someone else. It makes you feel late when really you are just on a different rhythm. It makes you dismiss a real step forward because your eyes are fixed on some idealized version of a race that was never yours to run. And that destroys people from the inside. It destroys them in a subtle way, a polished way, almost a respectable way. Because on the outside it can look like ambition. But on the inside, a lot of the time, it is self-rejection. Seneca warned about the danger of living according to public opinion. And now that danger has multiplied in almost a cruel way. You are constantly seeing pieces of other people's lives. Results without backstage. Smiles without breakdowns. Success without sacrifice. And then you start to feel like you are losing some universal race. But there is no universal race. There is only your path, your nature, your calling, your inner timing. The oak tree is not competing with the olive tree. Winter is not competing with spring. Everything ripens in its own season. Human beings are the ones who brutalize themselves by demanding that their process run on someone else's clock. Removing comparison in silence is a deep act of return. You come back to your lane, back to your own inner work, back to the question that actually matters. What in me needs to be cultivated right now? Not what the other person already achieved. Not what the other person is showing. Not what the other person seems to be. But what inside me is asking for attention, discipline, and truth. The Stoic grows stronger when he stops measuring his worth against the display case of other people's lives. He understands that the only comparison that helps is the one between who he was and who he is becoming. Maybe you have already felt this in some simple moment. Sometimes life is finally coming into alignment, but all it takes is looking outward too much for gratitude to disappear. You are building something beautiful. A new habit, a new perspective, a new peace. Then you compared. And what was once progress started feeling like failure. That is the trick of comparison. It does not need your life to be bad in order to hurt you. It just needs to convince you that someone else's life looks better. And appearance has always been one of illusion's favorite tools. So quietly, take your heart out of that arena. Stop checking so much. Stop measuring so much. Stop turning someone else's path into a verdict on your own. Some victories look shiny and are empty. Some slow seasons look like failure and are actually ripening. What belongs to you asks for presence, not comparison. Constancy, not anxiety. And many times, when you stop looking side to side, you realize you were exactly where you needed to be in order to grow. What happens after you remove those first three things? Something changes in the texture of your days. You breathe better. You speak less to convince and more to say only what needs to be said. You feel less pulled outside yourself. And that matters because Stoic philosophy was never meant to decorate thought. It was meant to hold up real life. It was made for the ordinary day, for difficult people, for an agitated mind, for the wound that keeps coming back, for pressure that repeats itself. Stoicism does not promise you a quiet world. It teaches you how not to build your home inside the noise. And maybe this is where a lot of people lose the thread. Because they imagine that removing something from your life always means getting rid of people, moving away, breaking cycles in some dramatic way. Sometimes, yes. But before that, Removing means stopping the feeding, stopping the maintenance, stopping the spotlight, stopping the energy you keep giving to what weakens you. You do not have to fight everything. Some things fade simply because you stop serving them, stop repeating the pattern, stop kneeling to the same old need. And that, even if it looks quiet, is revolutionary. Some people talk nonstop about change and barely change at all. The Stoic does the opposite. He changes inside first. Then he lets the outside catch up in its own time. There's dignity in that. Quiet dignity. You do not have to notify the world about every battle you have won within yourself. Some victories get stronger precisely because they were not exposed too early, like a flame protected from the wind, like a structure built from within before it ever shows on the outside. And that protection will matter for what comes next. Because after you strip away the need to explain yourself, the hunger for approval, and the habit of comparison, you start noticing other weights that once felt normal. Emotional weights, mental weights, relational weights. Things many people carry for a lifetime thinking they are just part of the package. But they are not. They just became familiar. And the fact that something is familiar does not mean it is healthy. A lot of prisons do not look like prisons simply because somebody has lived in them for too long. The fourth thing you should remove from your life in silence is resentment. That slow way of staying tied to something that should have already been released. Resentment is a kind of loyalty to pain. Someone hurt you. A situation was unfair. There was humiliation, abandonment, betrayal, disrespect. All of that can be real. All of that can leave deep marks. Stoicism does not ask you to pretend it did not hurt. It does not ask you to erase the experience with pretty phrases. What it asks is something else. Do not turn the pain into your identity. Do not make your wound your permanent address. Because look at what happens. When you feed resentment, the other person is not always still present in your actual life. But they are still ruling your inner world. Still taking up space in your mind. Still triggering your body. Still interfering with your mood, your worldview, your ability to trust. And there is the cruel irony. What hurt you once goes on hurting you over and over again, not because of what happened, but because of how you keep reliving it. Resentment is the past charging rent inside the present. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that people do wrong out of ignorance of the good. That does not mean excusing everything. It means not surrendering your peace to their mistakes. It means looking at what happened with sobriety, learning what needs to be learned, setting clear boundaries, and moving on. Forgiveness, from a Stoic point of view, is not always reconciliation. It is not always reconnection. It is not always a hug. Many times it is simply the firm decision not to keep poison in your own soul. You are not excusing evil. You are refusing to host it within yourself. Removing resentment in silence means you stop telling the same story to yourself in a way that keeps it bleeding. It means you stop revisiting the old scene in your mind, trying to force a new ending that will never come. It means accepting that there was loss, but refusing the extra waste. Because what happened was already enough. Do not add years of mental replay to it. There are people who grow old without ever emotionally leaving a single moment behind. That is not loyalty to the past. That is abandonment of the present. Maybe someone owes you an apology that will never come. Maybe someone will never admit what they did. Maybe justice will not arrive in the form you hoped for. And this is one of the hardest tests of the inner life, staying whole even without the compensation you thought would come. Seneca said we suffer more in imagination than in reality. Resentment is repetitive imagination. It takes one event and multiplies it inside you. The Stoic task is to break that cycle, not by pretending it did not happen, but by taking away its power to keep defining your peace. The fifth thing you should remove from your life in silence is constant hurry. Not diligence, not discipline, not responsibility. Hurry, that internal acceleration that makes you live as if everything is behind, as if every moment is not enough, as if every pause is guilt. Hurry is one of anxiety's favorite disguises. It passes itself off as productivity, ambition, commitment. But underneath, a lot of the time, it is just an inability to inhabit the present. The Stoic knows an agitated mind loses its center easily. A person who is always rushing on the inside can never find enough clarity to discern what truly matters. And without discernment, life becomes one long chain reaction. You answer everything, run to everything, accept everything, do everything with urgency, but almost nothing with depth. It becomes a life full of motion and starved of presence. And the most dangerous part is that socially, this is often rewarded. The hurried person looks important. looks in demand, looks necessary. But behind that image, there is often exhaustion, distraction, and emptiness. Seneca wrote about the shortness of life in a stunning way. The problem for him was not only that life is short, it was that we waste so much of it. And one of the most modern ways to waste life is to move through it without ever fully arriving in it. You end the day without having been fully present for a single moment. You eat while thinking about something else. Work while thinking about the next thing. Rest with guilt. Talk while your mind is somewhere else. Pray without presence. Love halfway. Live in fragments. Then wonder why everything feels shallow. Removing hurry and silence does not mean becoming slow in a lazy way. It means becoming deliberate. It means giving weight back to what matters. It means understanding that a governed mind is worth more than a packed schedule. You do not need to announce that you are changing your pace. You simply stop answering at the same speed as chaos. You start leaving a little empty space between one thing and the next. You begin doing one thing at a time with respect. You speak without trampling your own soul. And little by little, time stops feeling like an enemy. A hurried person almost never hears his own conscience. Because conscience speaks quietly. It does not scream over the noise of your rush. It takes some stillness to notice where you are betraying yourself, where you are exaggerating, where you are accepting what should have already been re-examined. Inner silence requires slowing down. And that is exactly why so many people run from it. Because when the speed drops, the truth shows up. And we are not always ready for that. Even so, that is where the Stoic chooses to live. Not in the panic of the immediate, but in the calm of someone who knows not everything needs to be solved at the frequency of fear. The sixth thing you should remove in silence is the excess of other people's opinions inside your mind. And this is not just about direct criticism. It is about the constant flow of voices, unsolicited advice, shallow comments, quick judgments, conclusions from people who do not know the ground you stand on. We live surrounded by opinions. About how to live, how to love, how to work, how to raise children, how to be happy, how to succeed, how to suffer, how to heal. Everybody talks. Everybody concludes. Everybody diagnoses. And if you do not have a solid center, you will live crowded inside with borrowed voices. Epictetus insisted on a central truth. It is not things themselves that disturb us, but the judgments we make about them. Now imagine what happens when, on top of your own judgments, you are carrying a whole crowd inside your head. You lose your center fast. One comment can take over the whole day. One criticism can become an identity. One poorly placed observation can echo for weeks. And so the soul grows congested. Not because life is impossible, but because you have let too many people live inside your inner field. Removing the excess of opinion in silence means choosing more carefully who gets access to your ear. Not every voice carries the same weight. Not every criticism deserves reflection. Not every observation contains wisdom. There is a huge difference between counsel and intrusion, between correction and interference, between care and projection. The Stoic learns to tell the difference. He learns that listening to more people is not always wisdom. Sometimes it is just accumulated confusion. There are moments when the wisest thing is not to ask for one more opinion. It is to sit in silence and ask your own reason what is prudent, what is necessary. That applies to family, friends, work, relationships, all of it. How many people are suffering less from the actual event and more from the number of interpretations they have absorbed around the event? The original problem would have been enough. Then come the opinions, the projections, the judgments, and now the person is carrying multiplied weight. A mature Stoic does not consult the crowd for every inner step. He filters, observes, considers, then decides according to what lines up with virtue, not with collective noise. And there is a particularly dangerous modern form of this excess, the entertainment of scandal, outrage, and gossip. The mind becomes hooked on commentary, on noise, on whatever the topic of the day is, on other people's lives, other people's failures, other people's drama. Then that same mind says it wants peace. But a mind fed on noise does not stumble into stillness by accident. It needs an inner diet. It needs better choices about what gets in. Because what gets in will sooner or later ask for space to stay. And not every piece of information deserves a home in your spirit. When you remove resentment, hurry, and the excess of outside opinion, an important shift begins. Your life stops being so reactive. And that is enormous. Because to live reactively is to hand the steering wheel to the environment. It is to let other people's words, the speed of the world, and the pain of the past dictate the climate of your soul. Stoicism is, in many ways, the art of interrupting that invisible surrender. Not so your heart becomes hard, but so your inner life becomes ordered. Not so you feel less, but so you feel in a nobler way. Not so you become stone, but so you stop being dragged around. There is a quiet strength in someone who does not need to answer everything. In someone who does not repeat the old story to keep the hurt alive. In someone who slows down without explaining it. In someone who refuses to hand over the mind to every passing voice. That kind of strength rarely makes noise, but it can hold up an entire life. It is the strength of someone who has understood that freedom is not doing everything you feel like doing. Freedom is not being enslaved by what weakens you. And maybe by now you can feel that removing things in silence is not only an act of renunciation. It is also an act of self-respect. You are telling yourself, I will not keep letting just anything pass through me without discernment. I will not keep treating my peace like unguarded territory. I will not keep living with the door wide open to everything that wears me down. And that changes the way you stand inside ordinary life. The world stays the same, but you stop offering yourself up to every disturbance in full. Now there is an even deeper layer to this cleansing. Because after cutting certain mental and emotional patterns, there comes a moment when you have to look at what you have been feeding by habit. And here the challenge gets more subtle. Habits, relationships, and inner narratives often get confused with personality. People say, that's just how I am, when the truth is they have simply repeated a pattern so many times it started to feel like identity. But Stoicism always invites a difficult and liberating question. Is this who I am, or is it only something I have practiced for too long? The seventh thing you should remove from your life in silence is the habit of wasting your strength on excesses that weaken your soul. And when I say excesses, I am not only talking about what is obviously destructive. I am talking about the kind of excess that looks harmless. Consumption without need. Constant distraction. The need for stimulation all the time. A mind that can no longer rest. A body never treated like a temple of reason, only like a warehouse for impulse. Stoic life requires sobriety, and sobriety is not rigidity. It is clarity about what strengthens you and what dissolves you. Look at the world and notice how everything seems designed to make you more scattered, more impulsive, more fragmented. You wake up and there are already demands. You sit for one moment and immediately reach for a screen, a sound, a detour, some form of filling. Emptiness scares you. Silence feels uncomfortable. Stillness feels unproductive. So you keep stuffing yourself with small doses of distraction until you lose contact with your own depth. The problem is not only the time spent. It is the energy diluted. It is the loss of contemplation. It is the growing inability to remain where real life actually is. Seneca deeply valued discipline of the soul, not as punishment, but as a way of not being possessed by desires without direction. Whoever does not govern his impulses ends up being governed by them. And that applies to food, speech, curiosity, entertainment, laziness, excess pleasure, addiction to novelty. There are people with brilliant minds who are weak inside not because they lack talent, but because they lack restraint. They exhaust themselves in many small pleasures that, when added together, steal the greatness of the spirit. Removing those excesses in silence is almost invisible work, but deeply transformative. You do not need to make some public declaration of purification. You do not need to post about your new era. You do not need to give speeches about focus and discipline. You just start cutting. One excess here, another there. One needless distraction. One impulse you used to obey without thought. One habit that looked harmless but keeps you dull, foggy, dependent. And in that patient subtraction, something precious starts coming back. Your strength. Strength here is not aggression. It is integrity of presence. It is waking up with more clarity. It is being able to finish what you started. It is becoming less enslaved to passing desire. It is looking at immediate pleasure and calmly asking, does this serve me or weaken me? The Stoic asks that kind of question because he knows every choice rehearses a type of soul. Every daily habit is a quiet declaration about who is governing your life, reason or impulse, clarity or appetite. The eighth thing you should remove from your life in silence is intimate closeness with people who drain your dignity. And this takes maturity, because not every difficult relationship should be thrown away. Stoicism does not teach childish escape. There are bonds that ask for patience, compassion, duty, and perseverance. But it is also true that there are presences that repeatedly deform your peace. People who mock your growth. People who sabotage your focus. People who only come near to extract, demand, compete, manipulate. People who feed on your guilt. People who mistake access for ownership. A lot of people stay in those relationships for one simple and painful reason. They got used to receiving emotional crumbs and calling it love, friendship, partnership, loyalty. But the soul feels it. It may learn to tolerate it, but it feels it. It feels the weight after the conversation. It feels the tension before the meeting. It feels the exhaustion of always being misunderstood. It feels the cost of having to shrink in order to fit. And when that keeps happening, something inside you begins to get sick. Because no philosophy can support for very long a life built around intimacy with contempt. Marcus Aurelius spoke of bearing with others in understanding, recognizing human limitation. That is noble. But to bear with someone does not mean to hand yourself over without discernment. There is a difference between compassion and permissiveness, between patience and self-abandonment, between love and emotional servitude. The Stoic can be kind without being available for every form of abuse, can be understanding without allowing himself to be dismantled, can respect the other person and still limit the space that person occupies. Removing certain relationships in silence is one of the highest forms of dignity, because you do not have to turn everything into confrontation, manifesto, or moral revenge. Sometimes all you need is less access, less exposure, less depth offered to people who only know what to do with the shallow version of you. Sometimes all you need is to stop insisting on a place where your soul always comes back smaller. And that can happen quietly, without hostility, without theater, just clarity. There are people who only notice your absence when you stop feeding the pattern that benefited them. And that is fine. Not every distance needs a detailed explanation. Sometimes your silence is the most honest answer. Not because you are trying to punish anyone, but because you finally understood that protecting your inner structure is also your responsibility. You were not made to be a storage room for someone else's disorder. You were not made to keep holding up the people who break you. You were not made to call it affection when it keeps stealing your center. The ninth thing you should remove from your life in silence is the victim story that sometimes settles in after pain. This is delicate because being hurt is real. Being wronged is real. Being rejected, betrayed, humiliated, abandoned, diminished, all of that can happen, and it does happen. The problem begins when the experience of pain becomes the main lens through which you interpret everything. When you not only went through something hard, but begin defining yourself by it. Your whole life starts organizing itself around what was done to you. And then instead of becoming the author of your rebuilding, you become the guardian of your own ruin. Stoicism does not deny adversity. Quite the opposite. It looks straight at it, but it refuses to put it on a throne. Epictetus, who knew limitation and hardship in a very concrete way, taught that we do not control events, but we do control our response. That is one of the most liberating ideas in Stoicism, because it gives dignity back without denying pain. Yes, it happened. Yes, it hurt. Yes, it cost you. But now what? Who will you be in response to this? That is the question that breaks the spell of permanent victimhood. The victim story offers hidden rewards, and it takes honesty to admit that. It can offer an excuse not to act. It can offer identity. It can offer attention. It can offer a certain kind of moral superiority. It can offer the feeling that the world owes you something. And all of that can be seductive when the heart is still wounded. But it is also a prison, because as long as you cling to that identity, your strength does not mature. Your responsibility stays postponed. Your autonomy weakens, and the past remains in the center. Removing that story in silence does not mean pretending to be invulnerable. It does not mean performing strength. It simply means you stop using your pain as the total explanation for everything. You begin telling yourself, this happened to me, but it is not all that I am. This marked me, but it will not govern the rest of my life. I can be wounded and still move. I can be sad and still be responsible for my next step. I can have been wronged and still refuse the identity of powerlessness. When someone makes that shift, something deep happens. They do not become cold. They become adult. They understand that they may not have chosen what they lived through, but they can choose the posture with which they keep living. And that changes how they work, love, speak, decide, endure loss, live with limits. Because the question, why did they do this to me, leaves the center, and another question enters, a much more fertile one. What does virtue ask of me now? That is a Stoic question, and it always reopens the road. Notice how these three pieces connect. The excesses that dissolve your strength, the relationships that drain your dignity, and the story that keeps you emotionally stuck in the role of the victim. All of them have something in common. All of them weaken your agency. All of them pull you away from the ability to lead your own life with reason and firmness. That is why they have to be removed with seriousness. Not out of trend, not out of ego, not for the aesthetics of self-control, but because a scattered soul, badly accompanied, clinging to its own helplessness, almost never blooms. At its heart, Stoicism is a call to inner sovereignty, not an arrogant kind of sovereignty that looks down on others. A humble kind that understands duties, limits, and responsibility. You do not govern the world. You do not govern the actions of others. You do not govern time, death, change, public opinion. But you do govern, or at least should govern, the use you make of your mind, the direction of your character, the integrity of your choices. And when that sovereignty begins to take root, a lot of things lose the right to stay. Some people spend their whole lives trying to add more recognition, more possessions, more attention, more experiences, more answers, and still they feel empty. Maybe because the real work was not to add, but to remove. Remove what keeps the soul from breathing. Remove what sabotages clarity. Remove what feeds confusion. Remove what pulls you away from who you could become. This is ancient wisdom, and it is still alive. Sometimes the road to peace is not about gaining more. It is about carrying less. And now we come to two final removals that may be the quietest of all, because they do not always have a clear outer form. They happen in the most intimate part of the self. Almost nobody sees them. Almost nobody applauds them. But when they truly happen, your whole life changes its tone. You begin to walk differently, decide differently, suffer differently, love differently, because when certain invisible chains finally break, the soul gets back a kind of space it had almost forgotten was possible. The 10th thing you should remove from your life in silence is the fear of being alone with yourself. That fear is more common than it seems. A lot of people do not only fear social loneliness. They fear meeting themselves. They fear the silence of their own room. They fear empty spaces without distraction. They fear sitting without stimulation and noticing what they feel, what they think, what they avoid, what they desire, what they grieve. So they keep running, keep surrounding themselves, keep numbing themselves. And it is not always love of people or curiosity about the world. A lot of the time, it is escape from self. But Stoicism is born exactly in that inward meeting. There is no serious philosophical life without some capacity for retreat. Marcus Aurelius spoke of finding retreat within yourself. And that is beautiful, because it points to a truth the modern world has almost forgotten. Peace does not depend only on the outside setting, but on the quality of your inner company. If you cannot stand being with yourself, then you will carry unrest everywhere. You can be surrounded by people, surrounded by comfort, and still there will be noise. Because the source of your discomfort is not outside. It is in the distance between you and yourself. Removing the fear of your own company in silence means learning again how to inhabit your interior life without panic. It means making peace with retreat. It means realizing that silence is not there to accuse you, but to reveal you. In that quiet, you start hearing what the rush had been drowning out. You see where you are living by impulse, where you are betraying yourself to be liked, where grief has still not been felt, where life is asking to be reordered. And at first, yes, this can hurt. Of course it can. Truth, when it finally gets room, rarely arrives without discomfort. But it is also from that truth that real peace is born. A person who learns to be with himself becomes less of a beggar for other people's presence. Not because he starts despising relationships, but because he stops using others as existential anesthesia. He loves better precisely because he is not asking another person to distract him from himself. He lives with more freedom because he no longer expects every bond to rescue him emotionally. He works with more steadiness because he does not need constant noise to feel alive. He rests more honestly because he no longer mistakes quiet for emptiness. There is a kind of spiritual elegance in someone who can close the door, sit down, breathe, and remain, without running, without instantly reaching for an escape. That kind of presence is rare and precious, and it does not appear out of nowhere. It is built through training, through small moments in which you choose not to abandon yourself, through moments in which you endure the first discomfort of silence until little by little it stops feeling like a threat and starts feeling like home. The 11th thing you should remove from your life in silence is your attachment to the old version of yourself. And maybe this is the hardest cut of all, because letting go of bad habits is already difficult. Letting go of unhealthy people is difficult too. But letting go of old identities, old stories about yourself, old characters you have been wearing for years, that reaches deep. There are people suffering not only because of what they lost, but because they keep trying to be who they no longer are. They stay loyal to an outdated image. They keep honoring a role the soul has already asked them to bury. Maybe you spent too long being the strong one for everybody, and now you need to accept your vulnerability without shame. Maybe you lived as the agreeable one, the one who never disappoints, and now you need to learn how to disappoint when it is the right thing to do. Maybe you were the rebel, the savior, the always available one, the funny one, the invisible one, the perfectionist, the indispensable one. And each one of those masks may have protected you at some point. But old protection can become present-day prison. What once helped you survive can become the very thing that prevents you from growing. The Stoics understood that life is in motion, and that the role of reason is to adjust to reality with dignity. Clinging to the old version of yourself is resisting reality out of fear. It is choosing the familiarity of a limited identity over the living demand of transformation. And that costs you dearly, because you can feel something in you trying to mature, yet you keep obeying outdated internal scripts. You keep responding the same old way, accepting the same old things, defining yourself with the same old lines. That's just who I am. I never get it right. That's how I've always been. This always happens to me. Little by little, those phrases stop describing you. They start imprisoning you. Removing the old version of yourself in silence does not mean denying your story. It means honoring it without staying trapped in it. It means recognizing who you were, being grateful for what that version helped you survive, and then allowing another way of being to be born. A way that is clearer, cleaner, more aligned with virtue. The Stoic does not worship a frozen ego. He cultivates character in constant refinement. He knows change is part of rational nature. He knows clinging to an identity that no longer serves is a way of disobeying your own conscience. And maybe that is why the deepest changes happen without an audience. Because when an old identity starts falling away, the process is intimate, quiet, almost sacred. You stop reacting in the old way. Stop chasing the same kinds of recognition. Stop choosing the same kind of suffering. Stop speaking about yourself with the same old language. And one day you realize, a part of me died, but not in a tragic way. It died the way something dies when it has already fulfilled its purpose. It died so that something truer could live. This is where everything comes together. The things you should remove from your life in silence are not just random behaviors. They form an architecture. When you stop explaining yourself, you become more whole. When you stop chasing approval, you become freer. When you let go of comparison, you return to your own path. When you release resentment, you give the present back to yourself. When you slow your hurry, you recover presence. When you filter opinions, you protect your center. When you cut excess, you recover strength. When you limit the relationships that degrade you, you preserve dignity. When you let go of the victim story, you reclaim agency. When you learn to be with yourself, you find inner shelter. When you release the old identity, you make room for rebirth. Notice the beauty in that. None of these removals depend entirely on the world cooperating. None of them require life outside you to get ideal first. They begin within, and that is liberating, because it means your life can change before the perfect circumstances show up. It can change in the way you interpret, in the way you choose, in the way you quietly withdraw fuel from what no longer deserves your strength. That has always been one of Stoicism's great powers. It returns the essential to the field of personal responsibility without falling into the illusion of total control. You do not control everything, but you control much more than you think once you stop abandoning yourself. Maybe the world will not notice your change right away. Maybe some people will find it strange. Maybe others will resist it. Maybe they will even try to pull you back toward the old version of you that was more convenient for them. That happens. It always has. Real change disturbs other people's expectations. But that is the natural cost of integrity. You were not made to be easily managed by the environment. You were made to become someone capable of standing upright even when the world around you prefers your confusion. And there is something deeply powerful about growing without announcing every step, about maturing without publicity, about healing certain wounds without turning them into a public identity, about simply living in a cleaner, firmer, quieter way. Because in the end, the most serious transformation does not need to look grand. It only needs to be real. Real in the moment when you almost react and then do not. Real in the moment when you almost explain yourself and choose silence. Real when you almost go hunting for approval and return to your own conscience instead. Real when you almost reopen the wound and decide not to feed it anymore. Real when you almost scatter yourself and choose sobriety instead. That is how a life changes. Not only in major events, but in quiet, repeated renunciations. In small acts of faithfulness to what is right. In small no's given to what weakens you. In small returns to center. And over time, those small movements build something immense. A soul less dependent on noise, less vulnerable to chaos, less seduced by appearances, more capable of walking with steadiness. So maybe the question is not only what you want to gain from this point on. Maybe the wiser question is this: what inside me should have already been left behind? What is still taking up space without deserving it? What is still draining my strength because I keep feeding it? What still holds me because it has become familiar? Those questions require honesty. And honesty is not always comfortable. But that is where the Stoic path begins. Not in fantasy. Not in performance. Not in speeches. In truth. And when you find the answer, do not feel the need to announce it to the whole world. Not every revolution needs noise. Some of the most important ones happen in silence, inside a heart that finally decided it will no longer serve what weakens it. You do not need trumpets to walk away from what destroys you. You do not need witnesses in order to protect your peace. You do not need to publish every boundary you built. You just need to honor it. At the end of the day, living wisely may have far less to do with adding more methods and far more to do with removing excess. Removing illusions. Removing dependencies. Removing noise. Removing the layers that keep you from what, deep down, you already know. Because when the soul becomes less crowded, it recognizes more clearly what matters. It recognizes virtue more clearly, and limits, and calm, and duty, and presence. It sees more clearly what deserves to remain, and what needs to be released. And maybe that is the image worth keeping. Someone who, instead of trying to control the whole world, begins putting his own inner house in order. Closing certain doors. Opening the right windows. Throwing away what is rotted. Cleaning what was neglected. Rearranging what piled up. And doing all of that without spectacle, without vanity, without needing approval. Just because he understood that a worthy life asks for this kind of work. Invisible work. Patient work. Deeply noble work. Remove in silence whatever steals your soul. Then let the result speak for you. Because when peace truly starts living inside someone, it does not need to shout in order to be noticed. It changes the eyes. Changes the way they walk. Changes the atmosphere around them. Changes the way they suffer and the way they remain. And maybe that is the most beautiful mark of a life touched by Stoicism. Less spectacle, more substance. Less noise, more center. Less need to prove, more courage to be. In the end, real freedom is not in being seen while you change. It is in actually changing. And before you go, subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this, more Stoic wisdom, more clarity, and more strength for everyday life. And leave a comment below telling me where you're watching from. I always love seeing how far these ideas travel, and it means a lot to know which part of the world you're listening from.